We're in Romans chapter 10, verses 10 to 17. And salvation, I've entitled this Salvation is for All. And I didn't have enough room to write for the Jew and the Gentile. In other words, salvation was intended to be for all people. And also by faith. We know that old saying that talk is cheap, and most of us certainly would agree. After all, if you're a smooth talker, you could sell anything. You could sell refrigerators to Eskimos, I'm sure. When a young man tells his girlfriend that he loves her, those words are from his mouth, not necessarily from his heart. He may be just a great salesman that has an agenda. Only when actions accompany his words can there be the beginning of truth. That's why that famous little, I don't even know where it came from, where it's somebody describing what Jesus did to show his love. And he said, Jesus loved me this much. Great. Actions. Now, most people you ask will say that they believe in God, but do they live like there is a God in their lives? In other words, are there actions to go with the words? Now, this is from verse 9 from last week. Paul says, if you confess with your mouth, those are the words, Jesus is Lord, and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. Then Paul explains, and this is where verse 10 picks up. For it is with your heart that you believe and are justified, or we might say found not guilty. And it is with your mouth that you confess and are saved. For it is with your heart that you believe, and it's with your mouth that you confess. The definition of confess can mean, and this is right out of Webster's 1828 dictionary, which is a great, I don't know how many people realize that Webster was certainly a Christian, and when he first wrote his first dictionary, the definitions were quite often spiritual definitions that related to God, and it's a free app you can get on your phone if you so desire. I know that's where I found this. But it means to own, or no, to confess, that's what we're talking about. To own, to avow, or acknowledge.
Agree, yeah.
In other words, you're agreeing. To publicly declare a belief and adherence to. In other words, you're saying publicly, this is what I believe, and you're showing it by living a life that is evidence of what you say you believe. That's confess. That's what confess means. We think of confess as, all right, confess. Did you do it or did you not do it?
I did it, and I'd do it again if I had to.
Yeah.
Unclean.
Okay. All right, lock them up.
Not again.
Not again. This sounds pretty serious. And it's much more than idle talk. There needs to be more than an emotional prayer to receive salvation. You ever want to watch a good YouTube video, watch Paul Washer do his little tirade on this prayer of salvation that churches use. If you just say these magic words. They don't say that, magic words, but you can whip actually, I remember being in this little neighborhood church in Costa Rica where when they got ready to do their altar call, they dimmed the lights and they would play this very soul-searching music.
I know the chord progression exactly.
Yeah, and then they would make their presentation. And now, I'm not saying that never is true, because it could be. There could be somebody who's been convicted throughout the week, and this is all it took to kind of push them over the edge. But it is more, when you receive salvation, it's more than just this emotional prayer. Because if there's no belief behind it, if there's no obedience to what you believe in, then all it is an emotional time that you had. Having proclaimed this truth, this is verse 11, Paul declares that, as the scripture says, anyone who trusts in him, capital H, Jesus, will never be put to shame. Never be put to shame by who? By Jesus. He declares that, as the scripture says, anyone who trusts in him, in other words, if you trust in him, he's not going to put you to shame. He isn't going to say, "Oh, you're such a liar." Salvation involves inward belief with your heart, and obviously not your physical heart, as well as outward confession with your mouth. That's why, quite often, I know it wasn't the case, I don't know if that's true at every place, but when I was baptized, which really, one day I ought to play that. And I'll tell you, it was very interesting because it was in the ocean in Hawaii, in a bay. I have a video. Yes.
I love to
Yes.
see that.
And
You're getting baptized.
and I mean, the waves were so strong that it was like you're trying to stand up straight. When I first played it, just a little humor, when I first watched it, and I haven't watched it since I was there, I didn't even recognize myself. I'm looking, where am I? I'm right in the foreground because the guy that I gave the camera to is filming it. You did it? Oh, okay. Well, whoever did it. I didn't recognize my own picture, my own self. No, I didn't recognize
I haven't been gone now.
No. So, but here was the point. One of the kind of rituals, so to speak, that Pastor Mike did there was he took us one at a time and said, I want you to declare what you believe, and publicly, in front of everybody. It's not a secret. And why you believe in Jesus, and maybe when some people, gave the 2-hour rendition of it.
The testimony.
Yeah, their whole testimony. But the point was that was pretty important. Because if you got up there and said, I don't know, my brother told me to come here and said we're going swimming, and then he held my head under the water, and I wondered what was going on. No, it's not. It's not that way.
Oh, brother, we're out though.
Yeah, exactly. Now for a long time, the Jews considered, I will, by the way, I'm going to burn it onto the DVD. Now for a long time, the Jews considered themselves unique
We still do.
among all the nations, yes, and they still do.
Special.
They still say we're God's chosen people. Now, some of the more doubting Jews will say, we're supposed to be God's chosen people, then why is all this happening to us? You know. But they consider themselves unique. It's funny how pride gets involved. Because all Jesus was saying was, yes, Abraham believed in me, and it was counted to him as righteousness. In other words, he was saved because he believed in me. But and as time went on, as Moses came on the scene, there were specific rules, because look at God. If anybody understands human nature, it's God. It's the Creator, right? So he knew that if he had just left people alone, they would wander into all kinds of stuff. They'd marry foreign women who would have them worshiping their false gods. And by the way, that happened to Solomon, of all people, supposedly the wisest man in the world. So they were unique. Why? Because God wanted them to be like a light at the top of a hill, shining its light down on all the nations, so that they would see the glory of God and be attracted to it and come to Him and be saved. But they didn't do that. They did the reverse. We're special. Don't talk to me. And eat with you? I'm not going to eat with you. Did all of that. I mean, it was a very personal thing. You know, you all had your hands in the same bowl and all that kind of thing.
In the Old Testament, it talks about, it says, "For the Lord had said to Moses, say to the children of Israel, you are a stiff-necked people. I could come up into your midst in one moment and consume you. Now therefore take off your ornaments that I may know what to do with you." You know, it's like they were chosen, but they were not special in any way. I mean, they made all kinds of mistakes.
Not the good kind of special, anyway.
Yeah.
Not the good kind of
Yeah. So they were unique. They thought of themselves as, and considered themselves being unique. But since Jesus died for all mankind, okay, all you got to do is read John 3:16. For God so loved what?
The world.
The world. It doesn't say, for God so loved the Jews, so that everybody that converted to Judaism would be saved. No, it didn't say anything like that. Paul writes, for there is, and this is so wonderful. Paul writes, there is no difference. This is in verse 12. Between Jew and Gentile. The same Lord is the Lord of all, and richly blesses all who call on Him. No difference between Jew and Gentile. I'm surprised that the Jews didn't string him up when he said this.
They tried.
I'm really surprised that they didn't drag him outside the city gates and stone him. Oh, wait a minute, that's what they did. Not only that, but obeying the law doesn't earn you any extra points with God. Now that goes against everything that we believe. You know, when you were in school and your grade was not so good and it just needed a little something to push you over to the next grade, the teacher could say, you can do this for
Extra credit.
extra credit. Gosh, you guys have had all these life experiences.
Yeah.
You can do this for, well, God doesn't say, I'm going to give you something to do that you can earn, you can get extra credit. And by the way, I went, you're going to know so much about me. So I went to Catholic school, right? I went to Catholic high school, very small school. And what I used to do, because I loved drawing, I loved art, whenever I would do a report, I would make a cover sheet. And the cover sheet would be this beautiful color with colored pencils, rendering of either Jesus on the cross or something similar to that. And do you think that those nuns were impressed by that? You bet they were. You bet they were. Even if the content was just normal, I'd get an A.
Wow.
Or an A+ because of that. And I really wasn't doing it for that reason. I really was doing it because I enjoyed doing it. But it doesn't take, I don't have to be too smart to put two and two together and realize I got a winning combination here. So everyone who calls on the name of the Lord. Who's the famous one that called out? He was on a cross right next to Jesus. The thief on the cross. He said,
Remember you.
yes, remember me when you come into your kingdom.
You recognize the sovereignty.
He recognized that Jesus was not lying, that he was who he said he was. And that took belief. That took an act of belief because the normal person might say, now wait a minute, how can he be? He's dying on a cross right next to me. How is it that he's the Son of God? How is that possible?
Well, if that doesn't bring you to the point of honesty, then I don't know what would.
Yes, I know. So he said, Jesus said, this day you will be with me in paradise. And paradise, by the way, was in Old Testament times, and I realized, because remember, Jesus had not resurrected yet. So people's sins were not forgiven yet. Paradise was also called Abraham's bosom. Hades was divided into basically what we would say hell and paradise, Abraham's bosom. So he didn't go to heaven with him. Heaven's in a different place in time. So that's verse 13. So everyone who calls on the name. He also states that in reverse order, there is a way to hear about this wonderful gospel. In other words, he says, how then can they call on the one? How can they call on Jesus when they don't believe in him, when they've never heard anything about him? How can they do this? How is it possible? How can they believe in the one who they have not heard about? So in verse 15, and of course this is the job of the preacher or the evangelist that's sent from God. And so Isaiah 52:7 says, how beautiful are the feet of those who bring good news. How beautiful. Even your feet are beautiful, Andy. Serious. When you proclaim the gospel, just the fact that you're proclaiming that makes all the difference. Of course, not everyone who hears about Jesus will respond positively I'm sure if you haven't had any of that kind of experience, maybe you've read about it for sure. It's one of the reasons why we're not so eager to rush out and open our mouth and proclaim the gospel to somebody, because we're afraid they're going to respond negatively to what we have to say. And nobody likes rejection. Maybe what you ought to do is go sell vacuum cleaners door to door for a while, and that might help you get past that. Not all the Israelites accepted the good news. Some clung to their traditions and teachings and rejected their Messiah. That's verse 16. Look, when you make a transition in your beliefs from something that you've been taught and held on to, and I'll give you a personal example of how this happened with me. It takes that transition from one bunch of traditions into a belief in Jesus alone.
Mm-hmm.
There is something in between which you kind of like. I'll give you an example. I had given my life to Christ, and I'm driving my car through the pineapple fields, and it's the most beautiful drive, because you're headed down toward the ocean. You can see the ocean, and you're driving down. It's serene. It's all of this kind of stuff. And I started saying the prayers that I remember from the Catholic Church. Because I just, it's like I wanted to say something, but I didn't know what to say.
Yeah.
And so I do believe that God honors that and says, okay,
Right.
I understand. I look at your heart, and I see what's going on in your heart. And so the fact that you're saying the Lord's Prayer, that's good.
Yeah.
That's
He
good.
sees the sincerity
Yes,
of the heart. Of
He
the
looks
person.
at our heart. That's exactly
And
what
that's
it
what it
is.
responds to, whether you're in Joel Osteen's church or
Yeah,
whether you're
that's right.
listening to a street geek preacher in Skid Row or
Yep.
to your grandmother tell you Bible stories.
Yeah. It's the same thing today. Many people hear the gospel, but they ignore it or they reject it. And may God have mercy on them and continue to maybe open their hearts. Some of them have had, and it's my opinion, some people have had such horrific experiences with organized religion that the moment that you bring up God, they shut down. They shut down. They don't want to hear another word,
Yeah.
because either it caused them pain because of what, or anger because they were felt like they were being controlled. Lots of reasons, but I know all kinds of people that's the reason. They never said it. They never said the words, but you could tell. And the more you got to know them, if they would open up and talk to you a little bit, you'd realize that's it. So whether you're a Muslim and you're seeing the truth, but you're thinking about the pain of leaving the traditions, and you know that your parents are gonna,
Or disown you.
the father may kill you. You're certainly going to be kicked out the door. For young girls, it's especially difficult. Since faith is necessary to accept God's gift of salvation, because we know it's by faith, it's by grace that you've been saved through faith, by way of faith. All can hear this message, but the faith has got to be there. Now, where in the world does the faith come from?
That's also
The word.
It's a gift Faith is even a gift. You can't even say it was because of my great gift of faith. That's why I'm here in heaven.
Repentance is good.
No. Yes, absolutely. That faith comes from hearing the message. And the message is heard through the Word of God, or the Word of Christ. It's not the wisdom of man, so don't let that confuse you, or when somebody wants to figure out how this, quote, religion lines up with human wisdom. It can never line up with human wisdom, because human wisdom says the rich get rich and the poor get poorer, and the end justifies the means. No matter what it takes to succeed, that's what I'm going to do. If it means stepping on the guy that's in the job next to me, I'll do that. Whatever. That's human wisdom. It's not good.
The road of faith is counterintuitive because it doesn't make sense to the world.
That's right.
It's not something that can be rationalized, or and that's because we be able to brag because of our insight.
Remember, it isn't just the words we say or the phrases that we repeat. We also show by our own obedience that we're serious. So when you, let's say you're we know we're all born with a conscience, and the conscience is the ability to be able to tell the difference between right and wrong. If you have, they call seared your conscience, if you've done something so many times that what was wrong seems right to you now, then, and you really can't, I think your conscience still keeps kicking in, but you're not listening anymore.
Right.
You know, you're doing the blah, 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 I can't hear you thing. If you start saying to yourself, start with something small. I know this is something I should be doing or something I shouldn't be doing. And so I'm gonna, for God's sake and for my sake, I'm going to be obedient to what I know He wants me to do or not to do. And start out with something small. Maybe set up a guardrail to keep yourself away from,
You know, just real quick, when I was doing prison ministry, there were people that would say, but I don't know what God's will is for my life, you know? And I would go to 1 Thessalonians and say, there it is. In everything give thanks. In everything give thanks, for this is the will of God concerning you. And that's like you said, the little thing. You know, just to cultivate that attitude of gratitude.
Yeah, start small. You don't have to say, well, I'm going to go to Africa and I'm going to be a missionary. Whoa, slow down. How about just being obedient in your own personal life? Start there.
Because you're no longer in that jail cell, you're in the message. That's
Yeah.
the most basic thing.
Yeah.